What's going on, everybody? Casanova back with a new video. But before we dive into things, does anybody recognize this cute little lady right here?
Upside in your castle? Yo, D, you should join the server. You could build some dope stuff here.
She is a content creator both on Twitch and on YouTube. You probably know her by her stage name, Fruity Cutie. And please do me a favor and do her a favor as well. Follow her on Twitch, subscribe to her YouTube channel. I will link them both down in the description.
Please, D!
Give her all the love, all the hype, and all the positivity you have to offer, because guess what? She deserves it. She is an S-tier content creator. I love her so much. Please give her a follow. She totally deserves all the love, all the hype.
Oh my goodness, hype, hype, hype.
All the follows, all the subscriptions, whatnot. You're not going to regret it. She is adorable, and she is absolutely amazing.
Join for the sake of fun!
Now, with that little promotion done and over, let's get into the real meat and juice of this video. What am I going to be doing today? Well, I am going to be making the main bodysuit of a Spider-Man costume. Technically, I went over this process in the previous making a Spider-Man video tutorial, but I wanted to go a bit further into detail about some of the things that I missed and some of the things that I typically do differently than what I did in the video. Now, before we get to making this, why don't we go over some of the materials that you're definitely going to need for this. So here is basically everything that you're going to need for making the main bodysuit of the costume. Obviously, you're going to need your pattern. That's a given. If you still need to learn how to make the Spider-Man costume pattern, there is a tutorial for that on this channel. I will link that in the description. But yeah, the paper pattern, that is definitely a given. And because this is a sewing project, obviously you're going to be needing some thread. Obviously, I'm going with red and blue because it's the classic Spider-Man. If you're going to be hand sewing, you're obviously going to need a needle. And if you don't feel like hand sewing, you can always use a sewing machine. I've gotten a lot better with using a sewing machine, so you're probably going to see me use this a lot. But if you don't want to use a sewing machine, you are more than welcome to hand stitch the entire costume. And since we're going to be using the pattern to mark out the shapes, you will need some Sharpies or some sort of markers. I'm going to be using Sharpies because that's probably what's going to show up best on camera. Some pins, obviously. And for this take, you're going to need a very long zipper. I actually ordered this in a pack of 25 off of eBay. And I actually have the company's business card right here. These zippers actually came to me all the way from Long Island City in New York. So, yeah. If you go to their website and make a purchase, tell them that D. Casanova from Washington State sent you. And also, since we're going to be working with a long zipper, you will need some brightly colored pencils to mark the zipper. I suggest you use either yellow or white because that's probably what's going to work best on black. You're also going to need some fabric scissors. And of course, you're going to need spandex. I have here red and blue spandex. Now, if you want to make it red and black, you totally can. But I decided to go with red and blue because that's what I know best. I have 2 yards of red spandex and 2 yards of blue spandex. And I believe these are from the Yaya Han collection. It's pretty good quality. And I would also suggest that you get a 4-way stretch material like these are and not a 2-way stretch like I used to use. If you can't find a 4-way stretch, 2-way stretch will work, but 4-way stretch is best. So I suggest you find 4-way stretch. Whether you have to go a long ways to a store or whether you have to order it offline, just trust me, four-way stretch is your best bet. You will also need some white sheer fabric or mesh if you want to make the underarm web wings. And since I'm going to be demonstrating how to make those, I will use this material, and I'm also going to be using some navy blue slick puff paint, just to add some color and to keep it consistent with the costume. And if you are going to do the underarm web wings, you're going to want to make your own template. And for that, all you really need is a piece of paper, a pencil, a ruler, a marker of sorts, and some paper scissors. But that is neither here nor there. I'm just going to be demonstrating how to make that. I think I have gone over everything. So, without further ado, let's get cracking into the suit making process. For making the bodysuit, we're going to start with making the pants. As you can see here, I have the pants pattern, and I have the blue spandex. Now, I'm going to start by unfolding it, and then refolding it in half, and then I'm going to lay the pattern up against the edge, and then I'm going to trace the pattern all around and cut it out. You may also want to press down on your pattern if it has a tendency to roll up on you, but all the same, I'm laying out my pattern and tracing it out, and once it's all traced out, you can then cut it out. Once you have your pants pieces cut out, you are then free to pin it together in all the right spots, meaning you pin the back halves together, you pin the front halves together, but then the legs, you don't pin those together on the other end, but instead you pin them in on one another, if that makes any sense. You guys know how pants look, you probably get the lingo by now. When it comes to sewing pants together, now you can hand sew it like I used to do, but as of late, I much prefer using a sewing machine when sewing pants together. It just creates a more sturdy connection, and it's less likely to fall apart and bust when you're doing all that awesome Spidey action pose and whatnot. So yeah, when it comes to sewing your pants together, a sewing machine is definitely going to be your best bet. But like I said, you can use hand sewing, or you can even do the lazy method and just hot glue it, but trust me, sewing is the better option. It's more sturdy. pants cut up, sewn together, and out of the way, we can now move on to the shirt half. Now, since we have the blue spandex still out, we can cut out the blue parts of the shirt first. This includes the front rib pieces, the back center piece, as well as the pieces for the sleeves. And here you're probably gonna get tired of the whole time-lapse thing, but trust me, this is actually gonna be a lot quicker than seeing all of this in real time. And trust me, you would get bored of real time real fast, so be grateful that I'm showing the time-lapse like I am right here. So, we traced out the rib pieces, now I'm tracing out the center back, and after this, I'll show you my tracing of the sleeve parts. You guys know the drill by now. As soon as you have all the blue pieces traced out on the spandex, go ahead and cut them out. And be sure to leave enough seam allowance for the machine so that it doesn't get caught. With all the blue pieces of the costume pretty much cut out, we can finally move on to the red. So we can pull out the pieces of the pattern which will be made out of the red fabric, and we can grab our red fabric as well. And as you can see, I am currently unfolding it, and we can get into tracing out the red parts of the costume and cutting those out as well. You know the drill, it's the same thing with the blue pieces. Trace them onto the fabric, cut them out, and wait before you go any further because I do the attachments in a specific way. Once you have all the components cut out, you should then pin each piece and make sure that all the lines match up with one another. And also make sure you pin each piece to its rightful area, such as pinning the rib pieces to the actual shirt, and make sure that the back pieces are pinned to the other back pieces. And make sure that it goes in this specific sequence for the back neck, back center, and then the back belt. And also, when you see me sewing the rib pieces to the shirt, you may want to take your time with this. I didn't do it the first time, and well, I had to use a stitch ripper to fix my mistakes and readjust everything. So yeah, when you sew everything together, take your time and be patient. With the back pieces sewn together, I think now is probably the best time to show you my sewing of the shirt pieces together. Now you may notice that I'm sewing the blue pieces as two separate pieces to each side of the red part. Now if you're not going to do the underarm web wings, then you're more than welcome to make the blue part of the sleeve one piece. However, if you are doing the underarm web wings, you're definitely going to want to make them two pieces. As you can see here, I have the back pieces all sewn together, even the back halves sewn together. And I also have the sleeves pinned. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Only sew the red parts of the sleeves and the red parts of the neck together. Do not sew the blue part yet. And you'll see why in due time. But for the time being, only sew the red parts of the neck and the sleeve together. Alright, now we're going to go over the simple process I went through to create the underarm web wing pattern. So as you can see, I have the center back piece to go as a bit of a guide for how long I want the underarm web wings to be. So I lined the bit for the underarm up with the corner, and then I used the bottom of the center back piece as, well, the length. And then I used a ruler to measure how long that distance is, and I basically turn the ruler to where the line that I made meets up with the ruler, and then I use the distance to pretty much draw from the corner down to the new point. It's kind of hard to explain, but hopefully from just watching what I'm doing, you get the basic idea of what I'm doing here. So Yeah, and as soon as you make enough lines for half the pattern, you can then create the arches to stand as the sticky silks. Hopefully, anybody who has seen a spider web in real life probably knows what I'm talking about. It's a bunch of drag lines and then the arches, aka the sticky silks. Uh, it's basic spider science. And like I said, this is only half the pattern. So I grab my white fabric, and it's sort of translucent. And translucent means that you can kind of see through it. And here I lay out the white fabric, then I bring in the template that I had made, and I lay it underneath the fabric. And see what I mean about it being somewhat translucent? Well, I position the template to where I feel it's best placed, and then I take a Sharpie and I copy the template onto the fabric. Once I finish duplicating one section, I turn the template over, and as you can see, it's created a whole new section. And I copy that section onto the section I already drew out. Once I have that, I pretty much do the same thing for the other underarm web wing, which means more drag lines and more arches. Because we just can't get enough of spider webs here. I mean, of course we can't. I mean, this is Spider-Man we're talking about. Duh. Once you have the underarm web wings all drawn out, you can cut that off from the rest of the fabric. And as you can see here, I have the blue puff paint, and I'm going to go over the Sharpie lines with the blue puff paint, because as I said, the costume is red and blue, and I feel like having the underarm web wings white and blue kind of keeps it in flow with the theme of the costume. That took forever. Seriously, this took forever. And now we wait. Once the puff paint is dry, you can then cut out the underarm web wings, but leave enough seam allowance for later. Trust me. As I bring the shirt in, I begin to pin the underarm web wings to the front of the shirt, and you'll see why in due time. And it also occurred to me after I pinned the underarm web wings on that I could also pin the front of the shirt to the front of the pants as well. as I bring the pants in, I should also note you may want to test try on the pants to see where you want the pieces of the shirt to meet into the pants, if that makes any sense. In my case, I decided to later take a pencil and then a Sharpie and mark about an inch from the top of the pants, and I use that as a guideline of where I want the sides of the bottom of the shirt to meet. So, I'm probably not making much sense, but that's the best way I can describe it. And then because the bottom of the shirt comes to a point, I decided to give some extra space so that it can have that iconic downward arrow point shape that Spider-Man shirt typically has. Once I've sewn the belt piece together, I then move on to the underarm web wings. And trust me, you're going to want to take your time with this as well, just to make sure that everything lines up and that the stitching is absolutely secure. Nice. Now we bring in the zipper, and the zipper goes down one side, across the back, and then back up the other side. And here I am measuring out about an inch of slack from the bottom, just so that when it gets to the underarm, there's no chance of anything snagging or getting caught. Now, the way I like to put in my zipper is I like to have it start at the left armpit, go down to the left side of my waist, then I go across the back, and then back up the right side. So, I also have to take into consideration that spandex stretches, and I'm probably going to want it to stretch in order for everything to fit properly. So, I measured about 13 inches for the sides, and then across the back, I had to stretch it out, and I decided instead of 16 inches for across the back, I decided to stretch it out for 18 inches, if I remember right. So, yeah. And I also did an in-between mark between the 18 inches so that I can meet the middle up with the center seam of the pants. That way, nothing will be off-centered, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, 13 down one side, 18 across the back, and then obviously another 13 up the other side.
I would also like to make note that I normally use a straight stitch and the length is almost always stretch. I typically use a straight stretch stitch because it's simple and straightforward, but when it comes to sewing on a zipper, I switch the length to a number 2 length, and I also switch out the presser foot. So yeah, that's something to take into consideration. And the reason I don't use a stretch length stitch when I'm working on a zipper is because sometimes I screw up when sewing on a zipper, so it's a good idea to use a standard stitch in case you screw up and you have to take out the thread and try again. So just note that that is likely to happen, and if you follow my advice there, trust me, it'll make things a bit easier. And you may also want to try basting the zipper before you use a machine to sew it on. I should also note that sewing up the other side, it might be just as tricky or even more trickier than sewing down the other side, but trust me, this stuff takes time, but once you have it all done, it is totally worth it. But just hang in there, you will get this, it just takes time. As soon as you have the entire zipper installed, you can then sew together the other edges and then you can pretty much move on. finally we can get to finishing the sleeves. Now, here's the situation when you're doing the underarm web wings, or at least with the situation that I have. So I'm folding the blue piece in half and I'm making a crease and I'm marking the center of that area because that's where I want the edge of the web wing to pretty much end. And then I use the, well, the beginning of the underarm as the beginning base. So, you want to sew the underarm web wing to one side of the sleeve, and then you want to sew the other side over top of it. But make sure that the center line of both sleeve halves join together. I think that's probably the best way I can describe it here. Now that I have the sleeves sewn together, I cut off the excess of the zipper that I don't need, and that gives us the freedom to finish sewing together the arms, pretty much. And here's an extra step for comfort if you feel it's needed. With the edges of the zipper being exposed, it's bound to cause some sort of armpit pain, and I'm pretty sure nobody likes that, unless you're somebody with that kind of quirk. I take a scrap piece of fabric and I fold it a certain way, and I use it to cover the edges of the zipper, and then, using the sewing machine, I secure it on. And here are some pictures of me trying on the suit and kind of looking like a dork. Because, well, I'm a weirdo. I'm weird like that.
And just like that, the main bodysuit should pretty much be done. As you saw from the pictures that I added in the video, I did try it on, and I'm more or less happy with it. There are a few things that I'm not too happy about, such as the sleeves. I think I made my pattern a bit too short. I probably should have added like a couple inches or so. Also, the neck is a bit loose. That was something that I forgot to take into account, but you're always free to bring the seams in a little bit. You could also add a chest seam, but make sure it's centered if you do that. But yeah, at this point, you are free to web up, add the spider symbols as you please. So, yep. And also, added bonus, the zipper, despite the addition of the web wings, which I don't usually do, you can still pretty much work the zipper like you normally can, as if they weren't there. You just gotta maneuver around them. So, yep. So I think that about does it for this video. Hopefully I was able to teach you something. I hope I was able to help somebody who watched this. Dekuji, Reiji Hesky Den. Ah, dang it, that's Czech, not English. Don't forget to follow Fruity Cutie on Twitch and subscribe to her YouTube channel. Once again, I will have them linked down in the video description. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. And feel free to comment if you learned something from me. And speaking of comments, I want to see who can recognize which character I have dressed up as in this video. Also, if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. I don't upload too much, so you will not be spammed with notifications about me or whatever else. Thank you so much for watching this video. I have been your host, Casanova, and I hope to catch all of you next time. Have a good day!